Georgia knocks out South Carolina. This was a nasty, nasty win for Georgia. When you just look at everything that happened, you doubled them up in yardage in terms of on the run game. Spencer Rattler didn't matter in any way. Spencer went. I don't even think he had 200 yards. Yeah, it was 13 of 25 for 118 yards with two interceptions. Um, it was not. It was yesterday was about Georgia. Period. And there's a couple of things to talk about here. First of all, it seems clear to me that Georgia is the best team in the country right now. And one thing that we talked about on riding home was you never necessarily know what you're watching when you're watching something. If you lived through the 80s or the 90s, it's much easier looking backward and describing things than when you were in the moment. Watching the Challenger in the 80s when we were children, I actually did not know that second that was a tragedy. And I only say that to say, you're in this moment with Georgia, and it's easy to remember when Alabama came to power. It was essentially 2008. I was at that Clemson game, and then I was at the Georgia game in Athens. Both those games were quite obviously in the moment beatings. What was less obvious was how Alabama was ascending to the throne for a dynasty, for sure. We've not had a dynasty other than Alabama since Nebraska in the 90s, okay? What is harder for me to tell right this second, it's not if Georgia's the number one team in the country. They're the best team in the country through the first 3 weeks. What's harder for me to tell is are we witnessing a changing of the guard? You cannot do that in September. You can't. I'm not sure you could do it in December. Okay? Just because, let's just say Georgia plays Alabama in the SEC championship game and beats them. I mean, this isn't about that. This is about gathering as many trophies as possible. These trophies. And until that happens, it's a little ridiculous to start talking about that. But that's because we're in the moment right now. Rewind to last year. It was the Vanderbilt game for me when I was like, these guys definitely can win the national championship. They're just too good. Yesterday in Columbia was another example this season how deadly this team can be. South Carolina is not in the universe of Georgia. South Carolina is not in the universe of Georgia. And you don't have I'm gonna talk about the game. Stetson, 16 to 23, 284 yards, two touchdowns. One of them was an 78 yarder to Brock Bowers, who is like, Optimus Prime out there. Carson Beck has basically played a full game. Okay. I talk about that in Legge Stocks, which I'm including down below. There's nothing spectacular about this team. And people are gonna be like, what are you talking about? I mean, who's the best player? Is it Bowers? Is it Stetson? Is it Jalen Carter? Is it is it Keely Ringo? I mean, how can you tell? How can you tell? Ladd McConkey, I mean, when you're on the field, you can see certain things. He certainly seems to be a little bit banged up, bruised something. Um, and this player just jumps out on the screen to me right now. Marcus Rosemary-Jacksaint, like he had a reception yesterday. I'm not talking about that. This guy is out there. I constantly see him flying around, like doing something. So he is like the seventh player or eighth player mentioned on this list. Like if he were like Cole Spear had as many receptions as Marcus Rosemary-Jacksaint, but Marcus Rosemary-Jacksaint is just like you can't miss it. So he's doing something constantly. Which my point in that is this team they've all like not just drank the Kool-Aid, like they're guzzling it. They believe in what they're doing. And for a time, it was hard to say for sure, oh yeah, Georgia's the best team in the country. Well, we can say that for sure. The question now becomes, are they the best program? And people will be like, well, how can you really extrapolate that from the South Carolina game? Did you watch the game? Like, let's go through the game just for a moment here, and the Georgia drives. All right, touchdown, 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 punt, field goal, touchdown, 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 field goal. 8 of 9 drives they scored a point, and you could kind of feel that they were not going to score on the punt drive. They were deep. They were at the 17. That was not the worst. Wait a second, no, that can't be right. They started. Excuse me. They started at the 9. Now they scored on drives from the 10 and the 12 as well. They scored 90-yard and an 88-yard drive. One of those was a throw to Brock Bowers. So, I consume Georgia a lot, obviously. And yesterday I consumed a lot of other TV, watching Clemson, Texas A&M, Miami. Clemson is not good. I mean, I don't know if they're good or they're not on Georgia's level. Now, can they beat them in a game? Alabama and Ohio State can beat Georgia. Now, think that they can't and see. I mean, they've got the guys, but they have deficiencies. I think Ohio State is probably better than Alabama. Just, I mean, like, I need to watch a little bit more, but like Alabama, that game with Texas is going to be step one. And they've got so many more competitive games that Ohio State just won't play. I mean, Michigan is going to be a challenge for a lot of people. I mean, Michigan looks better. They do. But damn, Georgia looks better. Now, I'm not going to sit here and get into last year's versus this year's. I think last year's team would still beat this year's team, but I'm not convinced completely. I mean, I have to pick a side because y'all will scream and yell and call me a hypocrite and so forth. Make sure you're picking up DAWGSTRUCTION. The link is down below. Listen, that is a great way to support us. That is a great way to support us. And not just that, man, get it for yourself. It's an awesome gift. It is a really cool commemorative edition of the 2021 season. You know, this team, like, they're not surprised. You got Nolan Smith out here on the last, 2 drives of the game for the defense, where South Carolina is just trying to score anything. And the last 2 drives for South Carolina were not bad. They had it for almost 10 minutes of the game. They had a 9-play drive for, 9 plays, but it was only for 12 yards, and they ate up 5 minutes. And then they had a 10-play, 64-yard touchdown drive. No, they didn't. No, they threw a pick. That was the one they threw a pick on. It was the 6-play, 45-yard drive where they scored the touchdown. So just like if you look at South Carolina, and this is a defense that replaced. I mean, like it's not hyperbolic to talk like this. They replaced a lot of like legendary Georgia players. They permitted 182 yards through 3 quarters. That's not even 61 yards a quarter. A quarter. Like you have 60-yard drives all the time. Georgia yesterday had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 60-yard plus drives. They don't give up first downs. South Carolina had 17 of them. I don't know how many were in the first 3 quarters of the game. But they can lose. Now, this is the part where people get going. Like they don't think anything bad can happen. Yeah, bad things can happen all the time. And when you're, like for instance, this week against Kent State, and by the way, go to Red Zone. It's our friends downtown on Clayton. Okay, you're going to Athens. I've lectured y'all about this. You probably just went to Columbia or you've been to Columbia before. And I'm telling y'all how much nicer it is in Athens, and people just don't know. They don't appreciate it because it's always nice. My wife is a pretty lady, and you forget how pretty she is until like you look at her and consider how fortunate you are to be with somebody that looks like that. Y'all don't know how good you've got it with Athens. Did you go to Columbia? Did you did you did you I mean, like, it's not the same. And places like Red Zone downtown is what I'm talking about. I don't know where downtown Columbia is, and I know Columbia pretty well. I guess it's by the Capitol. You know, nobody wants to go down there. There's nothing there. Downtown Athens has all sorts of great things. Food, places like this, places my daughter loves to go and just hang out. It's such a great place. Anyway, when you're downtown walking around, make sure you're going to Red Zone. See Scott and Mindy. Tell them we said hello. Get there on Friday. Saturday's going to be tough. Saturday's going to be tough. But appreciate what you've got, not just with Athens and not just with, Georgiadom. This team, I don't know if they're special. I don't know if they're special, but they are good. I mean, look at this guy. Just, you can't, he just like sort of disappears. Well, you're going to find him. He's going to be in the damn end zone. I can assure you of that. Stetson Bennett is, at this stage, if you cannot admit what I'm saying right now, you're just a straight up hater. He's one of the best quarterbacks at Georgia that they've ever had. And he is the shiftiest quarterback in Georgia history. He may be one of the shiftiest players that the program's ever had that carries the ball. I don't I it's hard for me to see all the time the throws. The fades were thrown to me multiple times. And they basically are saying, "Hey, 50-50 chance we score 7 points." And some these balls are just the other team cannot get them. The ball to Ladd McConkey, I don't know if that was just not a good throw or just not a great throw, but like Brock Bowers toe touched and saves you there, if you want to call it saves you. Maybe that's what they meant to do. On the ball into the Georgia section on the closed end zone at South Carolina. He is quite good. We don't need him taking any shots out there. That would be a mistake for him. But he's got like this sixth sense where he feels his pocket, his feeling of the pocket is not an insignificant attribute that he's got. And it's only maybe 3 or 4 times a game, but 3 or 4 times a game changes games. And you cannot compare Spencer Rattler to Stetson Bennett. They're not in the same universe. They're not. One is really good, and the other one is Spencer Rattler, who is struggling because his offensive line is not good, because he makes poor decisions, because this is not. I mean, this gets old too. This is a different type of defensive speed league, power. Like Georgia, like Carolina ran a little bit yesterday. It wasn't so horrible. They went for 92 yards. Now some of that was in the first half, but you don't ever like explode on these guys. They had their South Carolina's biggest play was that 46-yard pass from Rattler to Jaheim Bell. And then like Lloyd, who is a good running back, his long for the day was 13. Luke Doty, if you recall, he had the second longest run for South Carolina. That was in garbage time. I think he's changed his number, which has confused me pretty significantly out there. But like sometimes it seems like they are kind of running a little bit, but and then Juju McDowell had an 8-yard run. It's just it doesn't matter. You can't you're just not getting anywhere on these guys. And Stetson with the 16 yardage, John Edwards with an 18, Branson Robinson with an 11-yard carry, Carson had a 20-yard run, and then Ladd McConkey with the 13. Now the Bowers touchdown was just a 5-yard run, but I can assure you he ran about 25 yards on that one. But he had 121 yards on 5 carries. 5 receptions. Ladd was 4 of 52. I mean, I don't know if it was because he landed in the bushes over there at South Carolina. Yeah, he really rammed into that pretty hard. But he had a 452. I would like to see Kendall get in the end zone on that 135-yard reception he had. But again, Kendall, not a bad day. I mean, it was, let me do the math real quick, 68 yards on 12, 68 yards on 12 touches. I mean, that's 5.6 a touch. That's not Sony Michel, but that's not bad. Um, this again, now getting back to the parallels with the decades, you know, you don't know how uh, much of a ramification something is. I don't think until you can kind of look back at it. And what I wonder is how. I mean, are we in the middle of something and we can't know it yet or see it? Okay, Aaron Murray's been pretty uh, adamant. Ryan Curley has been pretty adamant, but I think Aaron knows a touch or two more about football. And I am just more cautious, generally speaking, about things. This is a very good team. We're going to see if they are this. I'm not sure they are yet, and I'm not being that guy, but you get a good quarterback and you get into a tricky situation, you're going to have to fight yourself out of there. And there's at least three good quarterbacks that they've got left. We know they're going to play. Excuse me. We know Georgia is going to play Tennessee, and Hendon Hooker has been a good. He's been a good quarterback for the Vols. Had a hard time against the Dogs, but he's been a good quarterback for the Dogs. And Tennessee scoring some serious points. Now the result against Pitt. And then you've got Will Levis, who I think is a good quarterback. I'm not sure. I don't know if he's an elite quarterback, but you got to go to Lexington. That's going to be a tricky game. But they goofed around with Florida, and Florida is not good. I'm not talking about Anthony Richardson. We know Bryce Young is legit. I mean, he is as challenging a person that Georgia will deal with in 2022. CJ Stroud's legit as well, but we don't know if Georgia's gonna play them. Okay, they can lose, and that's the thing that everybody needs to realize is that this team right now is dominant, no question. They're dominant, but you have to look at the landscape. Even in Alabama's dominance, they had some losses, and this is going again off memory. If you think about in 11, the loss to LSU, who was considered their equal. If you think about 12, the loss to Johnny Manziel in a Heisman Trophy moment. In 13, they lost to Auburn. It cost them everything. 14, the loss to Ohio State. 15, they lost to, well, 13, I think they lost to Ole Miss as well. I think in 15, they lost to the Rebels again. 16, they won the national, no, they lost to Clemson in the national championship game. 17, they lost to Auburn. I mean, you can lose games and still win the national championship. What folks should not, there's two things going on at once here. Folks should not assume just because Georgia is so dominant this moment that they will never lose. Number two, that they possibly lose does not mean they will have lost their dominance. These are not all the same thing. And I do not think this team should lose. Maybe the season period, even going into January, but it doesn't mean they won't. And this is now bigger than how bad do you beat South Carolina. This is bigger than how bad will you embarrass Georgia Tech, Auburn, and Florida in the same season. That's not what this is. This is a path to wherever the national championship game is. I cannot remember, and that's it. I mean, let's not act like that's not what this is, because that's all this is right now. This is not, 2004 and 2, which were good teams, and you're trying to escape the cockpit. No, this is about rubbing their beaks in the sand and letting them know what time it is. South Carolina was, good hosts as usual. Their fans do not believe right now. They just don't. I know a lot of them, and they are good people. but they do not believe in this program at this second, like this team, excuse me. I saw Shane Beamer's comments after the game, and you can be indignant all you want, or you can be kind of frustrated with the questions. Don't get your ass whipped at home on national television, and you won't be answering those questions. You know, they are a long way away from where they need to be, and Georgia just whipped their ass bad. Um, and like I like Shane Beamer. I think he has done a pretty good job at South Carolina, but you don't, they only got so much patience there either. And they'll love you up and everything, but unless you're beating Clemson, which doesn't look like it's going to happen this season, although Clemson is just not crisp in any way. Um, and unless the season has started for South Carolina. Like they've played Arkansas and Georgia and taken some L's there. And now they got South Carolina State and Charlotte. And, you better get to 3-2, which they probably will. And then you better get like 4 other wins. And they're there. I mean, Missouri, Georgia is going to throttle the next few teams they play. Kent State may give them a tougher game than some of these other teams in the pantheon of what are we watching, because Kent State is getting a noon game that no one's going to be thinking about when Georgia goes on the road to Missouri, which we'll find out what the story is there soon in terms of kickoff time. When Georgia goes to Missouri, Auburn, Vanderbilt, and then the week off before the Gators, those are not going to be games where you're sitting there going, who's going to win this game? Okay. So I think if you're the Dogs, you keep the practice is the most important part here. These games are not competitive. Who's winning in practice? How are you managing bodies? Does Lad McConkey need to play this week? It's it just that's the question. So you get guys in and out of there. It was good to see Brock Vandergriff and company in there at the end of the game. Thanks for watching. Make sure you're going to Red Zone on Saturday. We'll see you in Athens.